a global fight, which of course it already is. General Jack Keane, chairman for the Institute for the Study of War and a Fox News military analyst. General Keane, good to see you tonight.
Good to see you, Martha.
You spoke yesterday, and we had a conversation with Charles Krauthammer about it last night in terms of the focus of NATO. And I think we have a map that shows the number of attacks that have happened across Europe. And I know that you feel strongly that NATO, although their original purpose was to fend off Russia, and that remains a focus, they've got a bigger problem on their hands right now, do they not?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The way to defeat this, certainly, is you form an alliance, recognize that this is a multi-generational problem. We're fighting an ideology, much like fascism and Nazism and communism in the 20th century. And when they form safe havens, you have to crush them. And you have to have a sense of urgency to do that. When we don't do that properly, we get 9/11 because we didn't do it properly in Afghanistan. And we're not doing it properly in Syria. This is the problem that NATO has. ISIS formed the safe haven in Syria in 2012. They marauded over Iraq in 2014 with 30,000 fighters that grew from several hundred. They were able to plan, train, recruit, and inspire and direct attacks outside of Iraq and Syria, as we painfully are aware of, 32 of them in NATO countries alone. NATO and the Arabs should have crushed that safe haven in Syria years ago, and it's still there today. And it is because NATO and their leaders are not serious. They're not taking this threat seriously, and there are other leaders in the world like them who lack political and moral courage to see the truth and to tell their people the truth. That's what they're not doing.
One of the immediate responses after the Manchester bombing was to make sure that there were no hate crimes against people who live in the neighborhoods where this young man came from. Now, nobody wants hate to be directed at someone who has no reason to deserve that kind of treatment. But for that to be one of the initial reactions and one of the equally weighted reactions seems a bit foolhardy, does it not?
It absolutely is. Listen, most of these European nations are helping the threat of radical Islam to grow inside their nation. They have open borders. That's number one. That's a failed policy. Multiculturalism is a failed policy. In these Muslim communities, that is where the majority of the threat comes from. They're all Muslims. They live in Muslim communities, and they know each other. In those communities, the unemployment rate is either 2 times or in some cases 4 times the normal rate in these countries. The sense of isolation, disenfranchisement, lack of political and social justice for the people are all inside those communities. That's how the threat grows.
It is worth pointing out, though, that it was an imam and someone from a Muslim community group who flagged this young man in Manchester twice to counterterrorism officials and said, this guy is someone you need to keep an eye on. So why he was allowed to fly back and forth to Libya and Syria is another question. Quick question, though, for you on Egypt, because this is horrific. The reports that we're getting is that people were pulled off of these buses. They were gunned down. There were children involved. There were ISIS or Islamic extremist propaganda pamphlets that were left at that scene. So this is the beginning of Ramadan, Jack.
Yes, and we're going to have a wave of attacks worldwide, unfortunately, because the attacks always go up during Ramadan. It may surprise our viewers. There's almost been 500 radical Islamic attacks this year alone. We're averaging 28,000 fatalities a year as a result of it. A few years ago, it was only 3,000. This is what we're facing. Of course, they're targeting Christians, they're targeting Jews, and as we know, they kill mostly Muslims because this threat is taking place within the religion of Islam, and they consider their non-believers who are Muslims people who can and should be killed.
Well, this bus was on the way to St. Samuel Monastery, and these people had to have known that they were taking their lives in their hands to go there on this bus through this difficult area. And tonight, 28 of them, including a lot of children, are dead because they were brave enough to go there to try to carry out their religious mission. General Jack Keane, thank you, sir. Always good to see you.
Good talking to you, Martha.